Good evening and welcome to City News Connect. I'm Carly Robinson. Dinosaurs have long captured the imagination of the young and old, whether it's movies highlighting the wonder of these larger-than-life creatures or museums bringing us the real-world facts about what we know. But what exactly goes into expanding our understanding of the prehistoric? Tonight, we take you behind the scenes of the Department of Paleontology here at the University of Alberta. Scrape by scrape, each layer of dirt or rock carefully removed.
This is a hadrosaur rib that was found in two pieces, and it's encased in a relatively soft sandstone. So I'm just scraping away because we don't know what else might be in the sandstone, so we can't just break it off.
But Gus here isn't a paleontologist. The retired accountant spends a few hours each week lending his hands to science.
It's neat. I mean, I take breaks. I go and look at all the other dinosaurs, read what they are, or the other bones, and read what they are. And the experts come in, I ask them questions and stuff like that. It's just interesting.
And this volunteer help is needed. Just take a look at this massive fossil being cleaned for the first time since it was dug up in 1972.
Every summer we collect more specimens than we as staff can process in the winter season. So we have a constant backlog of specimens. So having volunteers working on that is great, and it allows them to experience this interesting history of our past, and it allows them to potentially develop their interest in paleontology if they want to go forward as a student.
That's essentially the story of Howard Gibbons.
We have some skulls down here of Pachyrhinosaurus from up north.
The lab tech keeps an eye on the large basement collection while managing the volunteers, which he started as one himself.
I started volunteering here when I was doing my education degree, and I just stayed around. I never taught. So I just became a volunteer here, and then they offered me a position, and I'm on contract here to do all the preparation work.
So the ultimate volunteer who never leaves and then gets a job.
That's about it, yeah.
From the field to the lab, it takes hours of careful work to fully uncover each fossil.
Other than the person who dug it up, you are the first person to see this thing in 65 million years. So that's kind of cool in itself.
Take this Brachiosaurus skull.
It came in upside down, so I had to clean out the entire bottom area. And then when we flipped it over, the fact that we could then see all the detail about the orbital area, and that was kind of nice.
It took Howard 3 years to prepare.
We didn't know a lot about it when we first brought it in. You know, we knew it was a Styracosaurus, but that was about as far as we went, and the whole skull came in at 1,100 kilos.
Most of these fossils filling the basement at the University of Alberta Department of Paleontology are found in our province. From the bone beds of Dinosaur National Park or Drumheller to dig sites in Edmonton's River Valley, and increasingly research happening in Grand Prairie. What is it about Alberta that we have the ability to find all these fossils?
Well, it's really a function of the geology, and also the way that geology is exposed. But if we think back to the late Cretaceous, which is the richest part of Alberta's dinosaur record by far, in the late Cretaceous, sea levels were very high, much higher than today, and in fact so high that seawater had spilled into the middle of the North American continent and formed what we call the interior seaway, which is a stretch of shallow marine water going up the middle of North America and dividing it into western and eastern land masses. And the western land mass was called Laramidia, so Alberta was on the east coast of Laramidia. It's funny to think of Alberta as a maritime province, but in the late Cretaceous, that's exactly what we were. So you can imagine rivers flowing down from western Laramidia to this interior seaway, crossing lowlands that were very lush and full of dinosaurs and other Cretaceous life. So you had an environment where these rivers were depositing sediment, a lot of things were living in the area, and as they died, they'd often end up in the rivers, being buried in the sediment and fossilizing.
We have a very small window onto that world, and there's a bias that's because of preservation. So what animals are nearest or in bodies of water, which is where they tend to get preserved better, there has to be water to move the sediment buries the bodies. The bigger the body is, the greater chance of it being preserved. The small animals are decompose more quickly, they get swept further down the river.
That perfect storm for preservation met with thousands of years of erosion, bringing the remains of these ancient animals to the surface in Alberta. And it draws people from around the world.
I grew up in Ireland, and Ireland does not have a dinosaur fossil record at all. So you could fit all of the Irish dinosaur fossils that have ever been found on the whole of the island in both of my hands. And standing in this room that we're standing in, there are 10 times more of that.
Yeah, because people living in Alberta might not realize the reputation around the world that Alberta has. Can you talk a little bit more about what people have to think about Alberta and the fossils here?
Absolutely. Well, being from a country that doesn't have dinosaur fossils, I can guarantee that what you have in your backyard here in Alberta, not everybody has in their own backyard. You know, we are just a few hours away from a UNESCO World Heritage Site in Dinosaur Provincial Park. It's also a UNESCO Geological Heritage Site, and that is really a one-of-a-kind place to find dinosaur fossils. It's incomparable to anywhere else in the world.
This Cretaceous fossil record giving us a unique glimpse at our past.
Studying the past is often a really good way to learn about the present. You can learn things from patterns that you see that help understand what's happening today. And a lot of those lessons that can be learned, you don't even realize what they're going to be until later.
The University of Alberta has 2 vertebrate paleontologists. They're the ones who study dinosaurs.
Quite a few specimens in here.
Professor Corwin Sullivan previously worked in Beijing, China. His research focuses on understanding the evolutionary link between dinosaurs and modern-day birds.
So we know that birds are essentially a specialized group of dinosaurs. They're dinosaurs that got weird. They lost their claws for the most part. They lost their teeth, developed beaks, developed feathers, and the ability to fly. And if we think of all the things that make a bird distinctive, like being bipedal, having feathers, having a beak, some of those things actually go back very early into the history of dinosaurs. Being bipedal would be an example, whereas we see others evolving in the fossil record, sort of one by one, coming in piecemeal during that evolutionary transition. Feathers, for example, go well back into what we call non-avian dinosaurs, into the predatory dinosaurs called theropods that include birds. There are lots of theropods that aren't birds but still have rudimentary feathers. And then in the fossil record of China in particular gives us a lot of evidence on this. You see the feathers becoming more elaborate until they become the blade-like veined feathers that we see in modern birds that can actually form aerodynamic surfaces and make flight possible.
When it comes to finding the fossils for this research,
it's a very accessible science, paleontology. Essentially all you need to do is just go outside and walk around and look for things.
Paleontologists often getting help from the public, with dinosaur fossils known in Edmonton's river valley.
And it always seems to be as well that the coolest finds are found by volunteers who are with us in the field season, or people who are out walking their dogs.
Fossils are really amazing resources that everybody should be able to appreciate. So if you see one on the ground, you can pick it up and look at it. As long as you're not in a park, if you're in a national park, you can't even pick the wildflowers.
Fossil remains the property of the Alberta government, technically speaking, but an individual can hold it in trust, can keep it indefinitely. The only restrictions are that it can't leave the province and can't be sold.
And if it's in the ground, you're not allowed to excavate it either. So that's really, really important. And the reason for that is that, fossils, when they've been buried underground for millions of years, have a tendency to want to fall apart after you get all that soil and sediment off them.
If you find something really cool, I would say take a picture of it, send an email to folks at the Curry Museum in Grand Prairie, or here at the University of Alberta in Edmonton, or to the Tyrrell Museum if you're further south in Alberta.
Meaning anyone in Alberta could stumble upon that next big discovery. or volunteer to help work on it.
I guess maybe at some point in the future, some researcher will be able to develop some further understanding in paleontology, in part because of some bone I helped clean, and who knows.
Next on City News Connect.
All the Jurassic Park movies had an immense effect.
From research to Hollywood, how movies like Jurassic Park are influencing the next generation of paleontologists. It's a movie more than 3 decades old. Jurassic Park first hit theaters in 1993. Since then, having an inescapable impact on paleontology around the world, but particularly here in Alberta. Edmonton's Metro Cinema packed. Not just for the Steven Spielberg classic, but a special appearance from Philip J. Currie. The University of Alberta professor is world-renowned and is one of 3 paleontologists who inspired the character of Alan Grant in the franchise.
Oh yeah, Jurassic Park had all the Jurassic Park movies had an immense effect.
The legacy of the film and of Phil Currie, impossible to miss at the University of Alberta Dino Lab.
There'd always been a small group of boys and girls, when they were little, 5 or 6, they got a book read to them about dinosaurs, or they picked one up at the library, and I want to be a dinosaur paleontologist. And then with Jurassic Park, suddenly, it's 10 times the number of people. I'm going to be a dinosaur paleontologist.
I'm a big fan of Jurassic Park.
That's exactly the story of Gavin Bradley.
Jurassic Park got loads and loads of new people interested in paleontology, especially from demographics that weren't being allowed access to paleontology before, right? We have more than 50% of people who are involved in paleontological research are women now, and that certainly was not the case prior to Jurassic Park coming out.
A greater interest from the public, which has sort of pushed the greater interest in museums having dinosaurs for exhibition, or universities having programs like ours.
Also gets members of the general public interested in what we do, which as a scientist, any sort of scientist, that's what you dream of, right? For me, the last part of the scientific method is communicating your science to people.
Obviously, we have Tyrell, we have this space here, the Philip Currie Museum in Grand Prairie. What are other ways that people can connect with these discoveries? Even there's an online course? Yeah,
we have a number of online courses that are totally free for anybody to take. The first one's called Dino 101, and if you simply Google Dino 101 at U Alberta, you'll be able to find out how to enroll in that. With paleontology being such an accessible science and something that most people are at least partially interested in it, it's great to have these really, really big outreach resources like the online courses that have been taken by more than 200,000 people in 160 different countries.
And while dinosaurs grab attention, the research at the University of Alberta includes looking at fish, snakes, and plants in the fossil record.
If you think about a dinosaur's life, it would have had parasites, it would have had to eat something, things would have potentially been trying to eat it, it would have been competing with other things that were occupying a similar ecological niche. So there was a whole ecosystem around dinosaurs that would have provided context for them and affected their lifestyles.
As paleontologists, we really have a front row seat to looking back to how climate change has affected biodiversity and species diversity throughout Earth's history. You know, part of being a paleontologist is the study of extinction and what happens when animals or plants or other organisms aren't able to adapt to massive shifts in the climate like we're seeing today.
Here in Alberta, most of the dinosaur fossils found are from the late Cretaceous time period. That ended with the extinction of non-flying dinosaurs. Over 60 different types of dinosaur fossils have been dug up in our province.
Currently, so it's part of an Albertosaurus, a large meat eater. This is the tibia, so the lower leg bone.
And keeping Alberta on the map, 2 dinosaurs with names from here.
You know, even if they haven't heard of Alberta before or Edmonton before, they've probably heard of Edmontosaurus or Albertosaurus, even if they live somewhere like Ireland. I say they're very, very different because one is an extremely large carnivorous dinosaur, a tyrannosaur, that's Albertosaurus, and the other is an extremely large herbivorous dinosaur,
giving scientists room to make educated guesses on their interactions. Would they ever be in a fight together?
Yes, potentially, because they occur together in the Horseshoe Canyon Formation, it's called, in the Drumheller area.
Where would your money be in that fight?
You know, well, if we're talking about an adult Edmontosaurus versus an adult Albertosaurus, I would bet Edmontosaurus would be such a big dinosaur that I would bet the Albertosaurus would be reluctant to engage. But if it did, I think it would probably get stomped. I would bet on the Edmontosaurus. But then I'm an Edmonton resident, so maybe I'm letting that color my perceptions. Now, if there were a Calgarysaurus versus the Edmontosaurus, and things would get serious.
Next on City News Connect.
This bone here has been on display in the museums for about 100 years.
You don't need to drive to Drumheller or Grand Prairie to find yourself in a dino museum. Ahead, we'll show you where at the University of Alberta you and your kids can touch a fossil. Not many people know that in the basement at the U of A, you can actually get a hands-on look at paleontology. And I have Lisa here to tell us a little bit more. Talk to me about the space and what people will find as they come through here.
We're in the Paleontology Museum at the University of Alberta. It's in the basement of the Department of Earth and Atmospheric Sciences, so in the Earth Sciences building. And we showcase life through time. The museum's going to be 90 years old next year, and you can see everything from some of the first things to live on the Earth, like stromatolites, and these are creatures that single-cell creatures that put oxygen into the atmosphere that we breathe. As we go younger, we see things from the Burgess Shale, where people can do a hike and see animals that have soft body preservation, and some of them are things like worms that look like bananas that are still around today. They lived near the seashore.
So things that would have lived through millions of years.
Yes, yeah, and we call those living fossils. And so living fossils are things like turtles that have been around many, many millions of years, and in some cases hundreds of millions of years, that are still around today. What makes our museum special is most of the fossils you can see are real, and you can even touch them.
You can touch them.
You can touch them. So for example, this bone here has been on display in the museums for about 100 years. And yeah, so maybe some people's grandparents have even touched that one, or great-grandparents.
It's lived millions of years and you can touch it along with millions of people, I'm sure.
Yes, that's right. We get about 5,000 people visiting every year, and it's everybody from university students and researchers. It's grade school children coming to do school visits. Members of the public come.
And so into a bit more sea life?
Yeah, we're starting to see things that we're more familiar with once we get past the big Permian extinction. By the time we hit the Triassic, you're seeing things on land like dinosaurs, lots of land plants, and reptiles, amphibians. And in the Jurassic period, you also see a nice diversity of marine reptiles, including animals that would have lived like dolphins. That's an ichthyosaur right there. This whole side of the museum, we cover the Cretaceous. So you've talked to other scientists and learned about why there's so great abundance of Cretaceous fossils in Alberta. And at that time, we had a seaway, so we see things that lived in saltwater. And we also saw things that lived on land, like dinosaurs.
And so the dinosaurs that you're going to find here, and lots of what you have, are things that the university has worked on?
Yes, most of our collections in paleontology were collected by researchers and have been studied. Rarely they've been donated, and sometimes early on in the department's history, when it was still common for people to buy and sell fossils, some of them would have been purchased as well. But yeah, most of the things you find are worked on by our researchers, so they have a very local story to tell.
Definitely. This one behind you, it's the
yes.
big one. Can you just tell me a little bit about it?
Yes, I would love to. This was the star of the show in 1935 when the Paleontology Museum opened. This is a Corythosaurus, and it is actually made from more than one animal. When they were collecting it, they accidentally collected fossils from 3 individuals and put it together. But it's an example of a hadrosaur, or a duck-tailed dinosaur. These are the most common kinds of fossil dinosaur pieces that you find in Alberta. So yeah, not only is it impressive in its size for a display early on in the department's history, but it tells a unique story about how science can change and paleontology and specifically it changes as we learn more about the different creatures. And so it took time for us to discover that this was 3 individuals.
Now, Earth and Atmospheric Sciences, obviously paleontology here, there's other departments that you can see and there's museums. Talk about what people can find here in the basement and when they can find it.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, overall the University of Alberta has 30 museum collections. So it ranges everything from clothing to dentistry, parasites, art, all kinds of good things. In my department, we house rocks, minerals, fossils, meteorites, which are rocks from space. And people can visit Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays from 8:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Admission is free. Just come to the basement of the Earth Sciences building and wander on in.
And you can go touch a fossil.
And you can go touch a fossil.
That's it for City News Connect, taking a look at the dino hunters right here in Edmonton, working at the University of Alberta Department of Paleontology. If there's something in the community you think we should take a deeper look at, please reach out. Head to citynews.ca and click on the Contact Us. I'm Carly Robinson. Have a good night.